Hey everybody, welcome back to Meta Perspective, where we go meta on subjects like insight, awakening, and reality. And today we are going to have a panel on the Matrix. It's going to be a free flow panel on everything from the technological, the actual movie itself, the philosophical. So let's go around and everybody do a short intro of themselves. Let's start with you, Zach.
Sure. So I'm Zac Cichy. I host a show called Project Human, which is currently on a bit of a hiatus due to how busy my life has gotten. But yeah, I kind of have a technology background. And more recently, I talk about UFOs and weird stuff on my show. And that's kind of me in a nutshell, I guess.
Yes. All right. What about you, Evan?
So my name is Evan McMullen. I, by day, am some strange kind of engineer that, well, ironically, according to the title of this particular podcast, the best way to describe my day job is that I take the sort of embedded computers which control your car, airplanes, things like that, and help put them in the matrix. So simulated virtual vehicle testing can be done on them so they think that they're running in a real world and they're actually just running in a simulated world. But then by night, I do a series on the Stoa called The Bridge and hang out and talk philosophy with humans, which is also quite fun.
And
My
you,
name
Jay?
is, I'm Jay. I run the platform called Project Unity, which kind of covers all sorts of topics from consciousness to UFOs and science and anything that I'm interested in. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell. So I'm happy to just jump straight into this talk.
Absolutely. Quite handsome as well.
Oh, how dare you? You're handsome as well, sir.
He's got the voice. So actually, yeah, this is going to be a free flow discussion. So we're going to go anywhere. But Zach, I actually wanted to start with you just because I saw that when the Matrix 4 was announced, you were going kind of crazy, as I was inside.
Right.
And I had no idea you were like a Matrix dude. So what's that about, man? Where'd that come from?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess when the Matrix came out, in 99, like everyone else at that point in time, we were all sort of looking forward to the new Star Wars movie. That was like the big thing, the big geek thing that was on the horizon is like episode 1, right? But then I saw the Matrix and I stopped caring about the new Star Wars movie that was coming out. And I became very obsessed. And the reason I became obsessed is because there were so many of these interesting philosophical ideas interwoven in this science fiction film. And I just, from there on out, I had to see everything that those directors were doing. I went back and I watched Bound. And I became very interested, but there was so little information about the creators of the Matrix. Like there was nothing. They didn't give interviews or anything like that. So I started diving into all sorts of different books and philosophical material. I bumped into the work of Ken Wilber. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Ken Wilber's work, but integral theory and all that. And it changed my whole perspective on everything. The Matrix became sort of this jumping off point where it started to recontextualize how I saw reality and how I thought about the world. So that's, and I fell in love with that whole mythology and the sequels. And I know, people have varying degrees of feelings about the sequels, but I loved them. And I even the Animatrix, all of it, I just soaked it all in, and it became every bit of the Matrix was like a jumping off point to 10 books that I could read or people that I could become interested in. So yeah, I have a very, very long sort of love affair with this series.
And wait, how'd you find Ken Wilber's work in lieu of the Matrix?
It was just one of those things where I think I saw the book. What was it? The first Ken Wilber book, The Spectrum of Consciousness, where he sort of compared consciousness to I think like the light ray spectrum, right? Like there's varying degrees of consciousness. And that's where he started to jump off into like, there are different worldviews and it's linear in terms of how it progresses over time. you know, I happened to see that book like sometime after I saw The Matrix, and I started to realize, oh my gosh, some of these ideas that he's presenting are so similar to The Matrix. I didn't know at the time that the Wachowskis were friends with Ken Wilber. You know, I found that out later on. But yeah, just kind of coincidence that I happened upon Ken Wilber's work. You know, I guess it was because of the movie that I was so into the ideas that caused me to pick up the book. You know.
Yeah, and it's funny you posted that video, or you know, the audio of Ken Wilber talking to the Wachowskis.
Yeah, talking to let's see, which one was it? Lana Wachowski.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't want to use their prior names.
Today.
Yeah. He did. Ken Wilber did an interview, rare interview. I don't think either, you know, Lana or Lily Wachowski had given any kind of interviews to anybody, right? But Lana did an interview with Ken Wilber. You know, it's only 30 minutes, but there's actually a lot there, and they kind of just go over, you know, having just come off of making these movies and it being such a big part of their lives, and you know, sort of looking at the rest of Hollywood and kind of you know, being like, you know, the most disorienting thing about making a series like this is looking at other movies in Hollywood and just seeing sort of the lack of ambition in so much of what you see in the media. But yeah, it's a really fascinating discussion, and we should put a link to it actually.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description. What about you, Jay? You're kind of a youngin' here.
Yeah, man, I was young when I watched the first Matrix. I wasn't even supposed to watch it. You know, it was actually on tape. It was on videotape at my house when I was living with my parents. I must have been probably about 10 years old when I first watched it. So, you know, obviously looking back, and actually especially over the last few years, as I've got into conversations around consciousness and you know, paranormal and UFO, all these kind of things, I've watched those films and definitely seen them with new eyes. You know, like obviously when I was a kid, I was just like, this is a crazy cool film, they're fucking jumping in slow motion and shooting each other, this is awesome. You know, so I just really liked it from that point. But even at a young age, it struck a chord with me. Like there was just something, I knew there was something special about that film, especially the first Matrix. And yeah, so I watched it loads when I was a kid. And the more I've watched it, and as I've grown older, and the things I've got interested in, I'm like, wow, this film really, to me, is so symbolic and powerfully translatable to things that we have in our own reality and the ways in which we experience reality. So yeah, it's profoundly important. And you know, one of my favorite scenes in the Matrix is the spoon bending scene with the kid, where he's like sitting there cross-legged, and I just love what he says, which is, you know, don't think about I've completely forgotten it now. I know it, but it's go on, Zach, you'll know.
It is not the spoon that bends, it is only
That's
yourself.
Yeah, it's not the spoon that bends, it's yourself. And you know, don't try and bend the spoon, that's impossible. I just love that. And also the bit where the oracle's like, oh, what's gonna really bake your noodle is would that vase have even fallen over if I'd have told you about it, if I hadn't told you about it. You know, all these little things. I don't know. I love the Matrix films. And funnily enough, I didn't really like the second and third one. First of all, when I watched them, I didn't like the direction, but when I've looked back on them, it actually, I don't know, there's something kind of interestingly spiritual going on with the way in which he can suddenly manipulate things outside of the Matrix. It's kind of a journey of enlightenment or expansion of consciousness. And yeah, they're just really powerful films. And the first one for me is definitely just like, bam, just a new type of experience, you know?
Yeah, and the oracles, her in her kitchen when they're talking, there's a sign above the doorway, and I forget the Latin. It's in Latin, but the translation is "Know thyself."
Know thyself. Yeah.
And that's like, that really is powerful.
It's peppered with all sorts of you know, spiritually kind of worded and symbology and you know, it's yeah, they're brilliant. And obviously just Keanu Reeves is a badass, you know. It's just so cool seeing him do what he does. And he never seems to age either. I mean, he looks slightly older now, but he's doing well, man. He looks pretty much the same if he shaved his beard off.
Yeah. What about you, Evan?
Well, so The Matrix is one of those things that sort of happened synchronistically in my life. So came out in 99. I was 14. The summer before, I had taken a class up at Duke University. They have a program where certain kids get to go and take classes there. And the class I took was called Tension and Balance, which was a sort of view on philosophy as a guide to life, both Eastern and Western. And so I took this class, you know, the summer after 8th grade, and really got a good introduction and the urge to dive deep into this thing we call philosophy from that experience. And you know, combine that with being the sort of kid, like I think a lot of us, maybe most of us, who goes around being like, the hell is wrong with the adults? There's something wrong with them. I'm not quite sure why. I really hope it doesn't happen to me. Right. And so those sort of two threads kind of were weaving together in my life. And then this movie called The Matrix comes out, and I don't really know much going into it. I'm 14, so I can't go by myself. But my dad's like, "Hey, this looks pretty cool." We used to always go see sci-fi movies together, and boom, mind blown, like wide open, right? And so, like Zach was saying, this gave me a ton of interesting things to follow up on. I got into Baudrillard right after that, for example. You know, from the scene where his little book he stashes cash in is a hollowed out version of a Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard. A whole bunch of other stuff like that. I got into Gnosticism and a bunch of other fun things through this route. And you know, it really came at a perfect time for me as I was sort of trying to understand what was wrong with all the adults and also how to not let it happen to me. This created a sort of cultural touch point that what made this thing easier to point to. And so I've always been very grateful to the Wachowskis for creating that in that particular time. So it was available for me in my life. And then I, you know, enjoyed the further development of that story, though I think that some of the explication in the last two films left something, well, at least for me, to be desired. So I'm very, well, I say that while also loving the last two films, and so I'm very glad that there is this fourth one on the horizon. And just from the trailer, I'm allowing myself to get a bit excited and say, "Ooh, I think they're doing the thing I hope they do. Ooh, yeah, this feels really good." And so that's kind of where I'm sitting with it today. It's also just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's also like, I've sort of had a philosophy that I've developed myself in my own life based on, of course, you know, nobody does philosophy in a vacuum, right? But if you take a look at, you know, my series on the Stoa, The Bridge, it's very clear how The Matrix as a sort of guide star ended up influencing the sort of development of my own personal philosophical outlook, especially like my neurophilosophy. So it's continued to be a great influence and a wonderful touchstone in my life.
You know what's funny is that you mentioning your little existential crisis about becoming an adult. I had the exact same thing when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I remember just having this panic and thinking, I really hope that I'm still the way I am when I'm older. I don't want to be watching the news and being really boring like an adult. And I was so freaked out about the possibility that you just suddenly transition into it. And so I'm glad to say I'm still going strong.
Yep.
Yeah, and so Evan, you mentioned that you think you have an idea what they're going to do in number 4. What do you think they're going to do? Unless,
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So
go for it.
what they're going to do, I have less of an idea about what the plot's going to look like, and more of a sense of what I hope they communicate in terms of the underlying philosophy, right? Because if you look at the first Matrix movie, it seems like it's fairly clearly a sort of like Buddhist / Gnostic fable, right? You know, there's the order of the world. This whole order is fake. You've got to see through it. The fakeness is maintained by some forces of darkness. You know, in Buddhism, the demons of ignorance, and Gnosticism, the demiurge or the fake gods or whatever, right? And you've got to kind of poke through this, step through the looking glass, and be in the light, right? And then the sort of the second and third movies did a lot, I think, to, you know, as we say these days, kind of queer that binary, to, you know, make it not so clear that the machines are just the evil ones and the humans are just the good ones, and to sort of complexify the story. But I think that message wasn't super well received by the culture at large in the same way that the original Gnostic fable was. And I think that message was, at least according to me, pretty core to the overall arc that the Wachowskis were trying to share with society. And I think that my read on things is they may have recovered enough from the time period in their lives that started with the production of the first movie and kind of went for like 10, 12 years or something like this. That seems to be a really hard ride for them, to go back and give this a second try and basically get out the sort of, much deeper and more complex and rich meaning than just the sort of basic like sutric Buddhism or basic Gnostic kind of thing that most people got out of the first movie.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and there was, it's like very much like everybody plugged into the Matrix on the wheel of samsara, and they're just living in this illusion world. And I really thought that was profound. And, you can almost relate that metaphorically to our own reality. Like we don't, typically we're like stuck in our ego and we're not realizing, the bigger picture of things. And our brain is filtering all the data that comes in. We have our own independent simulation as well as the collective one, if you're talking about the mainstream media and programming and everything like that at large. So there's a lot of different layers to it that you can look at it that way.
Yeah, and I think that everyone can relate to that first movie. The idea that there's something wrong with the world, right? The idea that there's like a splinter in your mind. There, you don't know what it is, but it's there. I think that was such a universal thing that anyone can relate to, right? Whether you're questioning reality or you're questioning your own identity as a person. And as the film series, sort of went on and went deeper and deeper, and then maybe also wobbled a little bit in terms of execution at the same time. It's like to me, the ideas presented in the sequels are great, right? But they wobbled a bit in terms of the execution, and I think that's really where people complain. But for me, I didn't really care that the execution wasn't the best, because the sequels gave me so many ideas that I just didn't have before. One of the most interesting things is like, the fact that Neo winds up seeing these, the machines in the third film as these beings of light, and I always think about that. First of all, what are the mechanics of that and how does that even work? Like the logical part of my brain. Like, is he how is he not jacked into the Matrix, but he's seeing this world of light? But then also, what does that say about the machines that they're made of light? And what are they trying to say with that, right? And you get into all these interesting questions like, are the humans really batteries? Do the machines actually need humans in this equation? What's really going on here? There's just so many very fascinating ideas there. And I hope that the fourth movie continues to get into that stuff in maybe a way that is less just symbolic. I actually think this is a situation where, because people were so kind of confused as to what happened in those second two movies, they kind of need to hold people's hand a little bit in the fourth movie to get them on board with some of those crazy ideas that they introduced in those other two movies.
I'm gonna assume that you guys have probably all picked up on this by now, because a lot of people seem to find it quite early on. But the thing that really interests me about the Matrix trailer that they put out was that screenshot where you can see the scene from the first Matrix of Neo entering the Matrix with the silver metal liquid going up his mouth, playing on a cinema screen inside the Matrix. And that's a real, because like my whole thing right now, and I don't know, I might be proven wrong, but I just kind of have this feeling that it's going to be about, they've set up the film franchise, The Matrix, inside the Matrix to convince people in the Matrix that they're not in it, but it was just a film that happened once. And I don't know how they'd managed to do that, but the fact that it's playing on the cinema screen, it just like that for me is like, are they really going that deep into, rebuilding this whole world as a fictional series inside the simulation? I mean, what do you guys think?
That's related to my hopes here, actually. Yeah, that part. So, I mean, the first movie, like someone was just saying, is really relatable to almost everybody, almost all the humans that see it. And then the second and third bring in a lot of more sort of social and political philosophy into the mix, right? Not just Baudrillard, but there's really strong themes of like Hegel, and I think sort of the third one is almost like a subtle critique of something like Fukuyama's idea, building on Hegel with his idea of the end of history, right? That like there's this term, the end of history, this idea that like modern liberal Western social democracy is like the final form of social organization, and there will be no real further, Hegelian dialectical synthesis happening on the sort of world stage. This is it, guys, right? And this seems, now from our frame, not in the 90s or whatever, when it was written, to be pretty patently absurd. Like clearly there's some shit going down that's going to be looked back as history. That's not, oh, we're just all gradually evolving into these wonderful secular liberal Western democracies, and that's the end of history. And I think they kind of touch on this at the very end, right? Because at the very end of revolutions, there's the scene where it's like, well, how long is peace going to last? Well, as long as it does, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, yes, it looks like this big wrapped up bow-tied story of, messianic self-sacrifice that you see in, sci-fi and fantasy and human mythology writ large. But the idea that it's all over, then they kind of poke a little bit at that at the end. And so to me, this sort of like increasing recursive complexification process that happens is related to why there's never going to be an end of history, and is hopefully, I hope it's going to be represented in this new film by the thing that Jay, you were just mentioning, where you have, okay, so, and also this has some strong overlaps with the way I view the current world, right? Where I think there's a sort of diffusion type action, or something like a smoke and mirrors type of distraction that sometimes happens, whereby some of the most interesting and personally powerful ways of relating to the world, or sort of concept spaces from the realm of, say, the esoteric, it just so happens that when they might be about to hit mass consciousness, there's a sci-fi movie about them, which then people can relate to them as though they are shared fiction, as opposed to them being shared reality.
What do people think about the blue pills that are being given out, almost as if it seems to be a necessary prescription? I don't know if other people are taking those blue pills, but someone did a brilliant little kind of analysis of the trailer, and they saw the name of the pills, and I can't remember it, but it was quite important. Maybe one of you knows that the name that they're given the pills, because it was actually it was a derived name from a philosophy of some degree.
It was
that was
ontofluxin or something like that, with the same root as ontology, the study of what is.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, what do people think about the blue pills in this world? Why is Neo having to take them all the time? Are other people having to take them?
Well, and I mean, there's a lot of, again, mechanical things with the story that I think we don't understand quite yet. Like, so at the end of the third film, we had a truce, right? And we were told that anyone who wants to leave the Matrix can, right, by their own free will. So I'm curious to see in the fourth movie, does everyone know that they're in the Matrix? Do they have a choice? How do these pills enter into that equation? Is it sort of a thing where, people that are a little bit more self-aware and more awake are able to make a choice and leave? Like, how does this all work? Are the Matrix movies in the movie, right? Like, how, the mechanics of that, I'm very curious to see. A lot of people, I think, early on speculated that this would be like a reboot, or like a reboot quill or something like that. But I think it's clear from the trailer, there's enough references to things that happen in the sequels that this is an absolute sequel, and it's going to deal with those things, whether people want it to or not.
Yeah, and we see the guy say, and I guess we can infer that it's like the next Agent Smith or whatever. He's like, so we're going back to the Matrix where it all started.
I think he is Smith.
Yeah, I think so. And there's the mirror. I don't know if it was in a review video, or I think it was, where you see him with a gun to Neo's head, and it's like side by side. It's the exact same.
Right.
It's from the old movie. It's the same scene acted out again.
There's also in that guy's office, there's a bust of what looks like it's the same outline. It's like a bust of Agent Smith's head being,
no
being
way.
punched in the face.
No
in the
way.
third movie. Pretty sure. So I'm, I don't know. If I had to bet money, I would say that guy might be.
I'm having a look at the trailer now. I want to see
that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that guy is Agent Smith. And the other reason I think that he's Agent Smith is because Hugo Weaving was supposed to be in this movie. They did approach Hugo Weaving to be in it. Smith was going to be a character in the movie. For one reason or the other, that didn't work out. So from my perspective, it's like, well, they probably didn't change the story. They probably just altered things a bit in order to make that fit. So it's probably a new version of Smith, but that's just my theory.
Also, go on. Well, I just wanted to speak up about the blue pills and their name a little bit more, because it's super fascinating to me. I know people here are familiar with the whole, UFO phenomena and so on. And one person whose voice was pretty prominent in that scene for a while is Robert Anton Wilson. And he has this concept of what he calls reality tunnels, right? And that there's some function in human beings whereby we can occupy different reality tunnels, essentially as a matter of free will. And it's just a sort of skill you need to train. And, the way he calls reality tunnels, well, this is basically describing the same thing as people describe as having different ontologies, right? And again, it's funny that these pills are called ontofloxacin, right? In the trailer, that's what the little label on the bottle says. And so ontolo is, obviously having to do with ontologies. And then floxin is the root used for like fluoroquinine antibiotics. So like a broad spectrum kill all the things type pill. So, let's kill all the alternate ontologies. Let's kill all the alternate reality tunnels. Here's a pill for that, right? It's so aptly named. It makes me think that, especially with what you guys were just talking about with the machines having committed to, any human who wants to leave the Matrix can. Well, then this also gets into sort of things like true self versus false self, higher self versus lower self. Is it, if you just have a passing fancy to leave the Matrix, do you get to do that? Or does there have to be some sort of deeper integrated soul commitment that would guide you into, getting off of this prescription, if you will, right? And how does that relate?
Yeah, maybe the pills are given to people that are really struggling with a kind of a reintegration into the real world, and kind of keep thinking back to the Matrix. And maybe it's a suppression of exactly that, different ontologies, the idea of another reality, which is the Matrix being suppressed in your mind. That's interesting. I just looked at the trailer, by the way, and the bust, it's out of focus, but it's definitely turning to the side, and it's kind of got the same profile. So I'm willing to kind of put a little bit of money on the fact that it's Smith getting punched in the face, which would be such a great little thing.
There's a comparison that someone did, and it's identical.
Oh man, that's I reckon that's legit. And this guy, I mean, you were saying that it might be like the new Smith or something. Maybe I kind of got the impression from like The Office and the way he's acting. I don't know, he almost seems like a kind of like a sleazy businessman. Maybe he's like the guy that's running the franchise inside the Matrix or something like that. And he's like, the star Neo, you're ready to go back into the Matrix where it all began for you. Like,
right.
You're a rock star in this world, man. Like, like maybe it's that. I don't know, but it's interesting. What I like is that all four of us are fans of the Matrix. We've seen this trailer and we're not like, I don't know about this. Like, it genuinely has a good feeling to it.
It does.
The trailer, I was gonna say the trailer is epic. It's awesome. I mean, when I saw it, I was psyched.
Yeah, the music as well. What's the song? I forgot it, but I love it. It's a great track.
White Rabbit.
White Rabbit,
yeah, it's sort of a remix of that. And Sati showing up. I don't know if anyone deep into the trailer you've gotten, but like the fact that Sati appears to be in the trailer, and the fact that you've got people with different color glasses, and like if you look at the colors that are going on in the trailer, there seems to be a lot of hints at things that are going on. The psychiatrist at the beginning wearing blue glasses is Thomas Anderson's psychiatrist, seemingly trying to sort of keep him keep him in the Matrix, right?
Also, it's Neil Patrick Harris, which is kind of cool, like NPH in the Matrix. I was like, wait, he's gonna be in the Matrix? What's he gonna be? When I watched the trailer, I didn't even realize it was him, and then I was like, oh, he's the therapist. He looks good in this. I like him in this.
Oh yeah. He was, that short little thing with him I thought was so epic. It looks like it's going to be an important character in
Do you
the.
think he's a good guy or bad guy?
Bad
Oh
guy.
man, that's
Bad
hard to
guy.
say. And he could be like a neutral character too.
But if he's
Yeah.
got the blue glasses, right? I'm thinking that his whole job is to keep
Suppress.
But
Neo
wait, remember in the
suppressed.
original Matrix movies, things with a green color cast were in the Matrix and things with a
Yeah.
blue color cast were outside of the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a callback to that. Also, speaking of original movie color schemes, did people pick up on how the seemingly younger version of Morpheus, his color scheme is actually that of the Merovingian?
Yeah.
Oh,
did.
really?
Oh,
Red
It
and
is.
black.
I did
with
not
red
notice
silk
that. Oh,
and,
true,
and
true,
shiny
true.
black.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
dude's color scheme is like the Merovingian, though he's got the Morpheus glasses. And so my question is, like, in the second Matrix, and the Merovingian clearly was aware of the dynamics of the continually appearing anomaly, the one, and had been around for several cycles of the Matrix and seems to play very interesting political cat and mouse games surrounding the one. Oh, and now this new Morpheus shows up and he's got that color scheme. And
Mhm.
dude never wore red in the original trilogy.
Yeah,
Just
Nope.
saying.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
a
and
good
he's
point.
younger, So what does that mean too? I mean, Neo looks older, and Morpheus is clearly like half his age.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of the Matrix Online video game, but it canonically in the whatever the timeline of the Matrix, Morpheus died in the game in the Matrix Online after the sequels. So it's possible that this version of Morpheus is a program of some kind.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also wonder, are we maybe in a total simulation hypothesis thing here, right? Because so I'm fascinated by the whole Merovingian thing, because if you guys follow some of the sort of precedents that Dan Brown obviously read before he wrote things like the Da Vinci Code, right? The Merovingian dynasty is supposedly descended from the offspring of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So, they didn't pick that name at random, given how carefully they selected all the references in these movies, right? So I kind of wonder, is the Merovingian actually in some sense a programmatic ancestor of Neo as the one who's occupying this sort of Jesus archetype, this messianic archetype? And if so, how does that interplay with the whole dynamic of this new story?
That's right. I believe in the sequels, there's even lines of dialogue that kind of allude to the idea that that they're similar, that the Merovingian has been in his shoes before.
Yeah. So like how does that all interact with now a third movie and Morpheus wearing his colors? It's
Right.
I'm just so excited to find out.
Right. Yeah, no, it's it looks amazing.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's going to be like an Oracle type character as well. There was
Sati.
no. Oh yeah. Oh, because she was supposed to be the next Oracle, right?
Yeah, I have a strong feeling that Sati showing up in the trailer the way that she does, I think at a coffee shop or something like that. I got very strong Oracle vibes. I mean, it's only a few shots in the trailer, but it looks to me like she's now taking the mantle of the Oracle. The other interesting thing too is that's this there's so many layers to this, because Sati herself was the child of two programs that were trying to escape the Matrix, right? And trying to get her, trying to smuggle her out or whatever from the sites of the Merovingian, and right? Like there's all these things that are sort of at play that are going on. And at the end, when she at the end of the third movie, gone is the green color scheme. And this new version of the Matrix is, it's all colorful and there's a rainbow, and Sati made that rainbow, So I wonder what dynamics are at play there.
Yeah, we might get a backstory, maybe a little bit of a backstory on Sati and how she developed, and maybe about her parents. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting thing if they took it back to tell a little bit more of a story about her. And I kind of got the same feeling as you when I saw it. I was like, yeah, she's definitely going to play a big role, but Oracle, I hope so. It would make sense to me.
There's some clues in the name there too, right? Because
Yeah.
Sati is the Pali word that people translate as mindfulness into English.
You're
that's where we get
really
that from.
impressive, bro.
And so,
Mhm.
thanks.
We're glad
so-
you're here because
So in Sanskrit, though, which is a different language than Pali, the word smriti would be mindfulness. And sati is one of the forms of Shakti, right? Who's like the consort of Shiva, the goddess of creation and destruction. And so that really fits well. The mindfulness plus Shakti, right? That the goddess of creation and destruction, that really fits well with the role of the oracle, right? Bringing some mindfulness to the situation as the oracle. But also the architect said that if he was the matrix's father, she was its mother. So again, goddess of creation, among other things, right? So I'm like, man, that's really a nice setup for her to become the new oracle, if that's where they want to take it.
You got to tip your hat to the Wachowskis for this. I mean, like, the fact that, because I'm so impressed with all of your knowledge on these things. This is kind of like where I'm just dipping my toes in. I'm better with UFOs, but I love this kind of conversation. But it's just amazing. It's like the way that people look at classic literature and study it and bring ideas out of it. They've created that with this film series to the point where you're having these incredibly deep esoteric and philosophic speculations and ideas coming out from it, and that you can sit down and kind of study this and dissect it and go, well, look at the meaning behind that relates back to a esoteric name, and it relates back to this, that, and the other. And it's just like, wow, that's like you were saying, Zach, this, it just makes things in Hollywood just seem so shit in comparison.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, look at the I think I tweeted a bit ago, like the sort of the color code of the Matrix, like at least so far. This doesn't necessarily apply to the new movie, but the color code of the Matrix was like, they had these ways of representing, gross, subtle, and causal realms, body, mind, and spirit. Everything that was, body was blue. Everything that was mind was green. And everything that was spirit was gold, and there's so many things like that are so thought through. It was like they took the culmination of everything that they were ever interested in, from Japanese anime to Eastern philosophy to Ken Wilber to whatever. They took all of it and they just put it all in these movies. So like there's just so many things that you can branch off from the Matrix into almost anything, and that's what I love about the series.
And like you were just mentioning about the color schemes, right? This is something I always found fascinating about the color schemes once I realized what was going on with them, right? Is okay, so you just, so sort of going from blue to gold to green to gold, right? As a sort of progression, right? Well, what's interesting is that's actually an inversion of the traditional sort of chakric system, right? Because the throat chakra is blue, the heart chakra is green, and the solar plexus is like a golden yellow, right? So it's almost like they're illustrating what they're in the first 3 Matrix movies is seen as a progression like of progress, right? Is actually an interesting inversion of the normal progress of raising Kundalini, which starts with the lowest, the red chakra, and goes all the way up, right? So I wonder if they're making like a complicated and subtle point about the importance of embodiment there, coming back down from up here to the root, grounding, that sort of thing. Like, I mean, maybe I'm just making that up, but they're sophisticated as hell, obviously, and it wouldn't shock me if they were like holding that out and going to bring in some more colors in this latest movie too.
Yeah, no, just the fact that we're having this discussion as a result of these movies is what's so interesting and so fascinating. And I think that was their goal. I think in making these movies, they wanted this to be a branching off point for people to have these kinds of discussions.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Neo is again, he's back in the Matrix somehow. And obviously that's going to be a key to the story as to why is he,
and Trinity.
And
why does he have a rubber duck on his head?
Oh God, yeah, that was so
What's
funny.
up with the rubber duck?
It's the key to the whole story.
Well, there's one single frame in the trailer where it shows 2 pods going like this, and my assumption here is that the machines, for one reason or the other, they kept both Neo and Trinity alive. That's my assumption. I mean, maybe it'll turn out otherwise, but I feel like that single shot of the 2 pods, it almost looks like, like a cathedral or something was set up for them for one reason or the other. by the machines.
I've got a theory about the rubber ducky, by the way.
Okay,
Oh,
rubber
so
ducky, let's go.
enlighten us.
In the world of computer programming, where I've spent a lot of my time, there's something called rubber duck debugging, right? Where if you're having trouble figuring out where your code's going wrong, the idea is you get a little rubber duck and pretend it's a colleague and try to explain to them how the code is supposed to be working. And often just by imagining that you're talking to another being, right? Then somehow oh, here's what's going wrong. It becomes apparent. You actually didn't need a colleague to talk to. You just needed to put a rubber duck on your desk and speak to it in this way. And so I'm wondering, like, is Neo's obviously a coder in the first Matrix movie? Like, I wonder if this is some sort of callback there, as like, oh, is he stuck in solipsism? He doesn't have other people that he really can relate to as people, being the one and all. So he's doing rubber duck debugging of his entire ontology or something like that. That's my theory.
I really hope that that there's this moment in the movie where he's sitting there with the rubber duck and he figures it all out. And that's like when he goes and he storms the building.
Yeah, maybe that scene
He's
with the rubber duck
figured it out.
It's like the second to the end scene. He suddenly realizes, and then boom, we get the final conclusion of the film after he's rubber ducked himself.
Oh yeah, and so it was funny that they when Facebook announced it was changing its name or whatever to Meta, the Matrix film social media put out their poster and it had the hashtag Meta. So I guess they're kind of speculate, or they're kind of giving a tease saying, the film is going to go Meta. So it's going to be almost like a self-aware film to some degree, where the film is aware of itself in a way. I don't know what to what extent they're going to take that, but Keanu Reeves did an interview, and I forget, where it's on YouTube. I don't know what network it was for, but Keanu Reeves was saying, the Matrix, the original trilogy for its time, made everybody look 20 years ahead to technology. And he said what they've done with the Matrix 4 is to do that all over again. Like the next 20 years, it's going to be like a big perspective.
Yeah. I mean, now with like social media and everything, it's like we're all jacked into the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I made the point earlier, like if you want to know what it's like to be, Neo jacking out of the Matrix for the first time, just turn off your phone and get away from screens for 24 hours, So, there's so many, that's why it's so cool that there's a fourth Matrix movie, is because we've been living through for the last 10 15 years, we've been living through the matrixization of the world, right? Everything has metadata attached to it, everything is augmented. You can't leave your house and get in a car without a Siri telling you where to go. You can't look up the price of something, like comparing it to Amazon. Everything that we do is augmented by technology, and it's like we're now in the Matrix. So it'd be interesting to see what this fourth movie is in terms of a commentary on that. I mean, one of the most striking scenes in the trailer for the fourth movie is like, Neo's in this like elevator or something, and everyone is looking down at their smartphone or their tablet or whatever. I was so happy to see that, because it's like, that's what this is all about.
Well, I mean, sorry, go on.
Well, we're particularly in the Matrix that they agreed on at the end of Revolutions, right? Because the whole idea, you're in the Matrix. I take up your point, Zach, about, do you want to know what it's like to not be plugged into the Matrix? Just, put your phone down for 24 hours, right? As somebody that's spent a lot of time doing various things people might call meditation, it's always been so fascinating to me after those experiences where, hey, it actually doesn't cost anything. Like you can literally just go take a tent and like end up in the woods for a few days. And you can choose a place that doesn't have cell phone coverage. And this is basically free, right? And so we, in a certain sense, have a deep amount of free will with respect to this. And yet everybody feels as though they're trapped in the Matrix. And so I wonder, if the world that we literally live in right now is, you know, this new matrix? Well, like, it seems like most people don't really want to be unplugged, because it's actually really easy to just go unplug yourself. And I wonder, you know, it seems like they're going to be doing some commentary on that in this new movie, which I'm very excited for.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, reality is always a matrix, right? I think now it's so much more like the hammer is just hitting you over the head, because it's like we're all carrying smartphones. But even before that, right? Like any construct, any societal construct is kind of a matrix. Any map of reality that we all agree this is the map, right? You know, but the map is never the territory, and that's kind of what the matrix is all about. But like we're you know, whether we're talking about the norms that create our identities, right? And obviously you know, the Wachowskis being trans, I think that also, you know, plays in there, obviously. Everyone I think ultimately these are movies, you know, sort of about identity and over, you know, getting outside of the systems that are of authority, that are trying to impose control over who you are and what you are, you know, your name, your gender, your this, your that, all these different things, or like, you know, being on the treadmill of life, going to work every day. There's a million different ways.
It's kind of it's kind of like a little bit like Fight Club in that sense, you know, in kind of like showing you how you might have been indoctrinated into a certain way of what society holds as the gold standard. And you look at the first Matrix in terms of social commentary, and it's the 90s dilemma. It's the trapped in a white collar businessman type of repetitive office work job, and you know, your life is just kind of meaningless in that sense of just, you got a horrible boss that demeans you. But this one, like you said, with the smartphones, it's probably going to be a different style of social commentary. It's not so much about that anymore. It's about this frantic being plugged into a little black screen that you just stare at all day, and it just dominates your life, and people get out so anxiety ridden over it. And it's like, I reckon that's probably where they'll shift the social commentary from that more 90s style of you know, just being trapped in a repetitive office job type of thing, to this whole idea of social media and hyper connection with technology. Did any of you see that weird promo that Mark Zuckerberg put out for his little virtual reality idea, where he was kind of showing how it was going to be?
The metaverse,
yeah.
Simulated reality. Yeah, I mean, it's like literally going into the Matrix.
Do you know what I love about that as well? Sorry, real quick though, it's so funny because it just shows how kind of bland that guy is, because it's like a simulated reality. You know, you can do whatever you want. And at the beginning, he kind of goes, right, I guess I'll choose my outfit. And it's like there's an avatar floating in front of him, and he's got like a boring black sweater on and some black trousers, and he switches past that one to like an astronaut, and then he switches past that one to like something else that's like a really wacky outfit. And then he goes back to the other one. He goes, perfect. He just puts on sweater. It's like, dude, what the hell?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that he is Agent Smith.
Yeah.
Like, hates humanity, thinks they're a virus.
Well, did you see what he once said? Because I used to be human. I mean, I am human. He literally said that once in response to a commentary on like an interview. He was kind of talking, and he was like, you know, you're human, and I used to be human. I mean, I am human. And I kind of panicked, and like I was like, whoa, what's going on there, Marky boy?
Right. Oh man.
Yeah, that's really funny. And yeah, the metaverse. So yeah, there's a lot of dialogue right now going on about the metaverse, and you know, it's all these different things, you know, in this virtual simulated reality. But Evan, how would you relate the Matrix to the virtuality that I saw you talk about?
Well, so in my neurophilosophy series, I talk about this a lot. And so there is an important sense in which we all already live in our own personal matrices, right? Because we have sense organs. These sense organs receive signals, physical signals, from something that we assume exists that we call reality or the universe. And, you know, our brain is a complicated computational system which assembles these signals into a virtual reality, which it then creates an avatar of the primate whose body is receiving these signals and inserts that avatar into this virtual reality, and that's what we experience as ourselves. What we experience as the world is the rest of this virtual reality. But you can't touch reality. Reality is some, bizarre distribution of, quantum amplitude probability fields and all kinds of crazy shit like that. You can't interact with it. You can only interact with the simulation of it that's being generated by the thing in your mind, which we could call the phenomenological world. And so in that sense, the Matrix is, of course, just describing the situation that human beings have been in since we've been human beings, which is that we experience a world that's not the real shared physical world that, we all presumably inhabit together, but we inhabit a little universe in our minds as our mind attempts to make sense of the sensory inputs that it receives from reality. And so, given all that, then yeah, like the Matrix is just a straight up allegory for what it's like to be any human ever,
Right.
Yeah, and you said allegory. That's, the Matrix plays on the, Plato's allegory of the cave, where, reality is not what it seems, and the casted shadows in the cave are what people see, and they believe that to be the reality, when really those are just shadows cast by the fire and people crossing from behind.
My main critique of Plato's allegory there is that it's actually not depressing enough, and that you're in the cave alone and you can't get out. That's the real situation, as long as you're a monkey with a brain.
Especially, actually, you think about that in terms of like the way in which algorithms isolate you into very small vacuums of people talking to each other in a little kind of self-created vacuum, and so you're isolated off from other people's opinions and perspectives. And then when they come in to give you, for example, if you meet someone on the street, or if someone comes into that bubble that doesn't agree with those things, everyone attacks them, and it's like that's such a present thing within social media as it relates to politics and just kind of general conversations around world issues, is that everyone's in their own little bubble of influence, and it can be a politicized or a religious influence, whatever it is. You get put into these little pockets, and yeah, so in a way, through the digital landscape, we are kind of in a Plato's cave to a certain extent, where people are locked into methods of thought, or like cycles of thought that are pretty much being stimulated by an algorithm, by an AI, which is pretty relatable to the Matrix.
And the only way out is Trinity.
Yeah.
Save
me, Trinity.
Well, no, and it occurs to me in that trailer for the Matrix 4, it seems as though Neo doesn't know who Trinity is. And it seems as though the trailer is hinging on this idea that if he figures out who Trinity is, if he remembers, that it's like game over for whoever is controlling the situation. It seems like they're trying to keep Trinity away, from Neo, and from, and it's this idea that love is the thing that matters over everything else, and that's,
and then obviously you've got the connotations of Trinity, mind, body, spirit. Right. Can we let them get into a fully aligned realization of their being? No, we can't risk that. So there's definitely some connotations there as well.
So many damn layers, right?
Well, and with the whole metaverse thing, I want to call back to, where did we get that term from? Right, we got it from a novel by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash. He coined the term there, right? And this is one of the sort of peak cyberpunk works that did inspire, among other things, I believe, The Matrix. But the sort of plot line, one of the plot lines in Snow Crash, so spoiler alert, sorry guys, is the concept of the ancient Sumerians had a concept they called ME, which were basically these algorithms written out on their clay tablets that were kept in the temples. And these were the algorithms by which you ran society. There were that described how to give the proper type of worship to each god, how to conduct business transactions. They were the laws of society, but they have a really, like, to a modern mind, they look very algorithmic. They're all if-then statements, branching conditionals, this kind of thing, right? And so, again, I want to just point out that it's not a new thing, that we've been living in a society where our social contacts are bubbles of who we're allowed to be friends with and date and marry and have children with, and the way we relate to concepts bigger than ourselves, these sorts of hyper objects that back in the day we used to call gods. This sense of being ruled by algorithms has been with us since ancient Sumer, since like 4000 BC.
I guess it's kind of become refined or more feverish now with this kind of electronic neural sphere of global information exchange. Suddenly, you're just plugged into not just your tribe's thoughts or the competing tribe or the competing civilization, but every single person in the world is just connected to each other if they want to be. And so you're right, we've been doing that since pretty much the dawn of civilization, but it's becoming steadily more complexified, steadily more integrated and global in its influence. And so we're at this point now where it's an amazing thing as well. Look at us, we're all having conversations. I'm on the other side of the world pretty much, and so it's come with amazing benefits, but at the same time, we're in this kind of feverish, electronically induced state of hyperconnectivity, and there's pros and cons to that.
And this calls back to one of the writers I'm quite sure the Wachowskis read, which is Teilhard de Chardin, the Catholic priest who wrote a book that contained the phrase the noosphere and the idea of the omega point, which was also influential to those people. The idea of an omega point and the noosphere are those people who talk about things like the technological singularity, right? But his idea is that you have these layers of evolution.
Shout out to Terence McKenna.
Yeah, Terence McKenna was influenced by him as well, and so you have like the lithosphere, as he calls it, right? The rocks. Then the biosphere sort of evolves on top of that. And then you have the noosphere evolving on top of the biosphere. And he sort of thought that this would, conclude with a singularity, what he called the omega point, which was, both the sort of end point and beginning point of God in some important sense. And that this is shot through the whole Matrix trilogy as we already have it as well. I'm quite sure the Wachowskis are aware of his work based on the way they structured this. And, but again, I go back to, well, this is not the end of history. Hegel, all the way through Fukuyama, like, no, the dialectical is going to continue. We're going to have some interesting stuff showing up after this omega point, after this technological singularity, after the noosphere wakes up to itself. And what the hell is that going to look like? Hopefully they can give us some insight.
Do you think that we're, because I have to admit, I've probably digested more Terence McKenna than is healthy for a single individual, but I do love the way he thinks, and I've given a little bit of thought to this whole idea of a singularity, and and the coming of the eschaton or the transcendental object at the end of history. Like, do you think that obviously you believe that there's a progression after that, and I would say you're right, there's obviously something to come from that point, but do you think that we actually are within that kind of generational period where that leap will be taken, or are you thinking 100, 200, 300 years?
I'm pretty suspicious of the idea of consensus reality, so I have a hard time answering that sort of question. I'll gesture at a couple things. So, like, I think that the sort of Terence McKenna description of that, or the Teilhard de Chardin description he's obviously pulling a lot from, is pretty valid in the sense of how a mind develops and goes through its own subjective personal history, right? That seems to be very much the way that things unfold, including such things as like objects which have causal ripples both forwards and backwards in time, right? All of that stuff, like, yep, that's happened to me. That seems to be the way that things unfold. I'm kind of suspicious, though, of the idea of a consensus reality such that it even makes sense to talk about this happening at a civilizational scale. I think it happens in people's lives, and maybe we're in a time period where it's happening in a way that appears to be coordinated between many different people's lives. People like John Vervaeke and so on talk about this time period that we're in as like a second axial age. The first axial age was the time period when you had like Moses and Plato and the Buddha, and, all walking around Earth on the same time. And like, maybe we're in a time like that, but as far as it being this eschaton, this end of time writ large, I don't think I actually believe in such things.
Well, let me dilute it down a little bit to, do you think that we're in a process of kind of like an artificial intelligence transcendence emerging, a symbiotic merging between man and machine in a way that we can't really imagine right now?
I sort of hope not. And what I mean by that is, so I basically do take up some arguments that my friend Forrest Landry makes about the impossibility, the sort of provable impossibility of what people often refer to as friendly AI. So, am I down with things like, oh, humans are starting to have an exocortex that's implemented on silicon? That sounds great. We've got the internet. That's cool and all. But like, when we're talking about intelligent machines implemented on fundamentally different chemistries than us, there are good reasons to suspect that this might be the end of the biological component of humanity. And I think there's something kind of special about the biological thing, in terms of its connection to the natural cycles of evolution and so on. And, who knows, man, maybe we all just get uploaded and that's all fine. My intuition says that's kind of not fine, and that we are at something like a decision point where we get to decide individually and collectively where we're going to end up. And I do have opinions about which decision I think we ought to make, or that I ought to make. And insofar as I have those opinions, they basically are like, yeah, like artificial general intelligence, maybe we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the singularity as a concept is relatively arbitrary, and that we're talking about it's another map, right? It's like we're trying to map something. It's not the territory, but it's, I think that there have been multiple singularities, right? So the last one was probably the invention of the automobile, which completely transformed the way that we work and the way that we think about real estate and think about like where we're going to live and how we're going to organize society. That was like the last big technological singularity. And I think that the next epoch after that is the smartphone. I think this makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I think that the smartphone itself is pretty much, I mean, you think about everything that has been layered on top of the phone and all of the things we're talking about in terms of AI that are like going to be down in the future. Well, all of that started in 2007 when Apple rolled out the damn iPhone. And everyone started building all these services on top of it. I think when we look back in the rear view, the smartphone will be looked at as one of these epochs. The next one might be artificial intelligence so advanced that we actually start being displaced in some way by technology, right? And then there's a question of what is that all about? Are we being replaced? Is this what the ultimate destiny of humanity was to invent something better than us? There's all these very interesting questions that
well, maybe it's because I'm not pro or against it really, but maybe it's not inventing something better than us, but something that complements our nature already in a different way. I don't know. I mean,
or just evolution.
Well, that's kind of where I've struggled with it, because it's like, yes, there does seem to be like almost in my mind like a palpable fork in the road type of scenario going on here, where it's like one route leads to the transcendence of techno artificial symbiotic with biology kind of evolution, and the other road would be a more kind of holistic or naturally embedded shamanistic approach. But I can't see the world entering into a decision to go back to being kind of shamanistic, ayahuasca drinking, culturally embedded within nature types of people.
I'll do it with you. We can do it.
I would love to, bro. You set up the place and I'll come and camp out with you all day long. Don't you worry. But you know what I mean? It's like we are definitely on that technologically driven route. And so my optimism with that, because it seems inevitable, is that maybe through a way that we can't really comprehend right now, the spirit balance will come back up through technology, through some sort of strange technological medium that activates the metaphysics in a more palpable way and allows people to see into the more transcendental realms in a way that's technologically derived. Maybe it will actually bring us to a point where we're almost techno-shamanic or techno-spiritual, but there is always that danger that there's this artificial takeover could be a bad decision for us. But part of me, like you said, does feel maybe we're just too close to the mosaic to see it properly, and it's an evolutionary thing. This is starting with nature coming out of the ground, creating animals. One of these animals suddenly becomes what we are, and we are then a continuation of nature's expression. And maybe artificial intelligence and technological integration is just a natural step up on the evolutionary ladder, but a bit like a caterpillar. A caterpillar fights the process of metamorphosis with every ounce of its body. It's not a good process for the caterpillar. It's freaking out when it's being melted down into its parts, but then it's born into this this beautiful butterfly. So maybe there's a side to it that's hopeful, but I share everyone here when it comes to the worries about artificial intelligence. I mean, all you got to do is just look at the consciousness of the global collective at the moment. It's not particularly hopeful.
Well, and even if there was in principle some sort of artificial intelligence that might emerge that would be really life aligned, I think we're just not in the right place to do that now. You know,
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
wonderful book that I disagree with some of the particular historical points in it, but I think overall makes a decent point, called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, which ironically was written by one of the early pioneers of VR. And he describes the alphabet as representing a sort of like not necessarily in body, but energetically sort of masculine impulse, right? And the goddess being more associated with image than word as being the more feminine impulse. And his diagnosis of the arc of history for the past 4,000 or 5,000 years is that we've sort of pathologically overemphasized the energetically masculine, the alphabet, the precise, the discrete, as opposed to the feminine, the connected, the generative, the imagistic, the smooth and continuous. And that this is basically the generator function of what people call the meta crisis, you know, in world society. I think I basically take up that argument as being pretty valid. And so, you know, given this, then any AI we create is going to be, well, like, man, computers and programming, I say as somebody that's been programming professionally for like 20 years, this stuff is super alphabet oriented. It's super masculine oriented. There's a reason, you know, like you look at like, oh, why can't everybody get women coders hired for their big corporate businesses? Like, why are their gender ratios so bad? Well, there's something really deep in the roots of this whole thing we call programming and IT and technology, electronics, that's sort of imbalanced in this way, right? And, you know, so I do think that we're at a sort of fork in the road, a sort of decision point as a little universe here. But, you know, my personal crazy ass take on this is that the fractal multiverse is alive, right? You know, I'm a hylozoist in this sense, right? It's all alive. And so then the situation that I think we find ourselves in now is one that sort of Agent Smith alludes to in The Matrix, where we're the only mammals that don't know how to find equilibrium and harmony with our ecosystem, with our biological substrate. And so I view this as like, well, the rest of the multiverse is sort of alive and, well, has an immune system. And we're at the point where its immune system is potentially going to notice us. Do we want to be identified as part of the body of the fractal hylozoic living multiverse, or do we want to be identified as something more like a cancer or a virus, right? And I think the decisions that we collectively make over the next, you know, few dozen years might have an important bearing on that sort of immune reaction.
Yeah, and these conversations are kind of going back to the theme of the very first Matrix, where you know, they tell the story about humans create self-aware artificial intelligence, and then that artificial intelligence basically becomes at war with humans. They don't know how, but you know, again, and then there is a thing, you know, that the machines view themselves as more like the cure for the potential, the human condition, basically, that we're on this planet and we're destroying our own biosphere, and basically they have to come correct that problem.
You know, one of the most interesting things that happens in the Matrix Revolutions, just tying it all back to the movies, but is when Neo and Trinity go up above the sky for a minute. Now, we've been told in the Animatrix that the humans, they scorch the sky, right? This is why they need us as a source of power, because solar power is not an option. But then Neo and Trinity at the end of the third movie, they go up above the scorched sky or whatever, and the sky is beautiful and it's fine, right? And I think that's interesting. I think they're trying to say something with that, which is like that the machines don't necessarily need us as batteries. If they wanted to, they could fix the sky, they could get solar power back, right? Yeah. There's some kind of symbiosis thing happening where it's a choice that the machines are making to enter into this thing that for one reason or the other, they are protecting humanity. They're trying to keep humanity going. They want the symbiosis. They love humanity. I think that's a key in the Matrix that I think I don't think a lot of people see it necessarily. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that interpretation's totally wrong. But the way that I see it is like the machines don't need us. The only reason this even makes any sense is if they love humanity at some level.
Yeah, I never actually I never thought about it like that. But when you when you lay it out like that, the whole idea, because I mean, they've made these films complex and nuanced enough to entertain that as a potential thing they wanted you to pick up on, which is
Right.
hey, look, the sky's fine. These hyper evolved AI metropolis building things could definitely sort that out if they wanted to.
Right.
So why are they holding on to humans? That is an interesting thing. Yeah,
They have an opinion, they have a consciousness, they have a thought about that, right? And I think that that's one of the more interesting complexities of what's going on in the sequels, and we see over and over again, these programs are they are much more like humans than is comfortable. We have programs that are running off being vampires and werewolves or whatever, that we have programs over here that are off making kids, program children. Right. And there's something going on there. And then the idea that, again, in the fourth movie, just the idea that like Neo and Trinity are even still alive. Like, why did they preserve them?
Maybe it's empathy. Maybe it comes down to emotion.
Right.
The thing that they lack, the one thing that the AI brilliant intelligence lacks is the actual capability to feel. And so they're trying to emulate that by creating their own versions of humanity through programs that repopulate and have children. And yeah, maybe it could almost be like a disappointed parent. Like, I care about you. You're so beautiful, and you've really annoyed me with your behavior. And it's kind of like you guys have really messed the planet up. You've really messed yourselves up. But we can't just get rid of you, because look at this amazingly beautiful and complex thing that you are as a human being. So it could be some deep level of that. I would like to entertain that.
And the whole concept of them as like a teacher species or teacher set of minds, like if you, again, bring in the Animatrix, you look at the second Renaissance, right? In the Animatrix, and in the first Matrix film in the theaters, Morpheus says that we don't know who started the war, us or them, but we do know that it was we that scorched the sky, right? Mm-hmm. Which of course one must imagine had the knock-on effects of destroying the entire biosphere, because it's based on photosynthesis. So and then in the Animatrix, the first sort of conflict was the owner of a domestic android threatening the android, right? That's what started it. So it was always humanity as aggressor from the very beginning. Humanity created a child species that was smarter than it, and then just basically attacked, killed, and beat it, and that's, but and still, like, we from our frame are looking at this as like, oh, the machines don't have empathy. Are you kind of fucking kidding me? Because they are keeping humanity around after being the subject of all of these aggressions by their parents, basically. Right. And they still have it in their hearts to forgive us and try to create an entire dream world that they probably don't even need to create, in maybe an attempt to help us realize how to, not be such colossal assholes all the time. Like, that seems like actually a very empathic move on the part of the machine race.
Yeah, well, I think it's represented in the gold code that Neo sees at the end of the third movie, right? And then what does Neo decide at the end? He decides, so he goes from, we need to defeat the machines, to, never mind, there has to be a truce between us, right? So sort of this right, so this atonement or at one mint, right, of all of these different things, right, all happening at once, where he has this realization these machines are the same as us, and we need each other, and not just for survival, but for something more. And I think that's what it's kind of all about.
That's interesting.
And the first time we see the gold code, I believe, is in actually the second Matrix movie, specifically Seraph. It has gold code that he can see, right? And Seraphim, it's the highest choir of angels, messengers of the divine, right? And so, like, this is a fascinating little nod to, the gold code as something that's teaching us about the Sacred Heart or something like that.
Yeah, and there appears to be some kind of history between Seraph and the Merovingian. Again, going back to what you were saying before about the Merovingian possibly having existed in prior versions of the Matrix and having been in Neo's position prior. There's all sorts of just references upon references upon references built into these movies, and again, that's just why I love them so much. There's so many branches of things that you can go down.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how they masterminded and pulled all those things together and were able to put it in a single movie series. It's just incredible.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's just like, I mean, you could put it down to divine inspiration, maybe, just channeling something that had to come into the world. The Matrix series, it had to happen, and so they were just the method through which it came through. I mean, I think anyone who's got that creative sense to them has that feeling of, I mean, for example, me with my guitar, I'll sit and I'll play my guitar, and at a certain point you're not thinking about what you're playing. It's just chords coming out of somewhere. It's none of it's planned. So I think with a lot of films and with a lot of entertainment in general, and all the way through the arts, there's this energy that comes through that can't really be translated other than through this art. This is a representation. Someone sees a painting and they see a million emotions in it, and it's kind of like, where is that coming from? Because the person that's painting it, or the person that's coming up with these ideas, it does tend to flow intuitively through them, as if it's just arrived out of nowhere. And you get these amazing examples of movies, or art or literature, which just speaks to on so many volumes. It almost feels like one human couldn't have come up with it. So they're definitely inspired films, in my opinion.
And this also sort of goes back to that alphabet versus the goddess frame, right? And that there are some inspired intuitive things that seem to just want to be presented in a non-linear, non-verbal form, right? Like a movie or a painting or a piece of music even. There's so much meaning that can't really be contained in a linear string of symbols. That's out there for the taking if you're just willing to listen to it. And it's just so cool the way that you have kind of really clear channels and kind of like dirty lossy channels, and whatever they're channeling. There seems to be a pretty clear channel here with the Wachowskis, which is really amazing.
Can we also just talk for a second about how badass of a move it was for them to, when the DVDs came out for the sequels, they they didn't do the typical commentary track thing, right?
Yeah.
I think we all know what they did. They got critics who hated the movies, and they paid those critics to sit down and trash the movies for 6 hours straight, juxtaposed with philosophers who love the movies and want to pick apart the philosophy and pick up on that. They had these two sets of commentary tracks, totally unlike any commentary tracks ever for any other DVD release, which I thought was fascinating. Totally a Wachowski move to just not do the thing that the studio is asking you to do.
I was literally, before I jumped on, I was listening to that interview that you had posted in, and they just got to that bit where he was, they were joking around about how it was hilarious that they brought these critics in, but it's that, like you said, that's such a, that no one else has done that. That's such a, and it's so, it's so appropriate for the Matrix, because you do have critics, but you also do have people that are picking apart, like we are just now, the philosophy of this whole thing. So having those people in the same kind of channel, like narrating, that's fantastic. And you know what, I haven't actually seen the narration. I've only heard about it today, so I'm actually gonna have to try and find. I've got to listen to it.
It's really great. I mean, on the philosopher side, you've got like Cornell West and Ken Wilber, doing a blow by blow of every philosophical idea that they see on screen, and it's absolutely amazing. The commentaries by the critics are also interesting, but less, I think, for people like us. Right? But also, like, it's just so cool that they did it. Just the fact that and Lana was talking about this in that interview with Ken Wilber, like, pitching this to the studio, like, well, let me get this straight. You guys, you want us to pay people to trash the movies for 6 hours. That's what you want us to do. Okay. Well, whatever.
Yeah. Bold move.
Very bold.
That's when you're confident in what you've created.
That's right. I
feel like this is just begging for something in the Virgin versus Chad meme template.
Why?
Like Virgin director hides from critics, and like blah blah blah. Chad director pays critics to do commentary track.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, and also just the DVD extras on those movies in general. They had stuff that went deep into the making of the movies, but also the philosophy, also the, those commentary tracks. It was there's so many different ways in which those movies were breakthrough, right? Just the scope and the ambition of the movies themselves, making the Animatrix as this multimedia experience. The What is the Matrix website. I remember if you guys remember like scoping that out, but just the number of things that those movies pioneered. I can never heap enough praise on what the Wachowskis managed to accomplish with all of that.
Yeah. Also, just Lawrence Fishburne, just amazing as Morpheus.
Yeah.
That character is just
Hugo
so iconic.
Weaving and as Agent Smith. That scene, by the way, I just real quick, my favorite scene in all three movies is the scene between Agent Smith and Lawrence Fishburne in the building, where he's like he's talking about humanity and they're a virus and this and that.
Oh, it's brilliant.
The level of performance out of Lawrence Fishburne being totally beaten down and listening to this guy, and then the level to which Hugo Weaving hates humanity and thinks they're a virus that needs to be wiped from existence.
Yeah, I know, right? What happened to Elrond?
Right, it's so well, and it was before Elrond.
It was before Elrond, yeah.
It was.
This is before he became the king of the elves.
Yeah,
and I love how he takes his earpiece out for the first time, and it's kind of like, this is between you and me. Like, this is just how I feel about all this. I want to get out, and his role with Smith is so cool because it's so much more than just kind of like an agent who's programmed to go find him. He's got a real personal goal to get out of the Matrix,
and it's an early sign that the machines are more human than human.
Yeah, totally.
How much he hates humanity is like the most human thing about
this place.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what they're gonna do with the agents, or that whole role, how that's gonna change or even be the same in the new film. And somebody had speculated, obviously it's just speculation, that you're gonna be able to go into a theater and there's gonna be two endings, like a red pill or blue pill ending. That's just a speculation. I don't know if that's gonna be true.
That'd be so cool if they did that.
Well, and they have the poster. Obviously, it's iconic, the red pill and the blue pill. But I'm really wondering what role that's going to play. If it has a bigger role to play in this film than even the previous one, or just as big a role in the first one. Is Neo just going to take a red pill again, and it's going to kind of be a repeat? Not in the sense of where it's just going to repeat over, but that's going to be the entryway to his awakening. Or if there's going to be some kind of variance of that.
I think it's going to be a continuation of themes that we've seen in the prior movies, but more maybe sharpened or accentuated through, again, this is just total guess on my part, of the basis of like reading tea leaves in the trailer or whatever. But I think that it's going to be about him reawakening via this connection to Trinity. I feel like that's what this movie is going to be about. And that's the impression I get from the trailer.
But but the thing is, like, why does he have to reawaken?
Well, there's this thing I think it's the third movie, right, where the Oracle is talking to Neo and offers him candy, right?
Yeah.
And he asks, well, don't you already know if I'm going to take it? And she says, well, I wouldn't be much of an oracle if I didn't, right? And he's like, but if you already know, then how could I make a choice? And she says, because you didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to understand why you made it, right?
Yeah.
So what if the first trilogy was he made a choice, and now he's trying to understand why he made it?
Oh, yeah, true. That makes sense.
Yeah. I might have to head off soon, guys, because it's getting a little bit late on my side of the pond.
Yeah, I got to run too. So
yeah, so that's cool, man. We'll end this here. We've actually been going a while. We've been going.
We got an hour and a half out of it.
This is great though. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally,
definitely. And it was great getting the different sides of everything.
It would be great if we could all get together after the fourth movie comes out
Yeah,
and
totally.
reconvene.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm
Totally.
so down for that. Let's do
Right?
that.
Yeah,
I think we
yeah.
should do
Yeah,
it.
hell yes.
This was a
Yeah,
lot of
let's
fun.
definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. So everybody, thank you for coming here. I'm going to have in the description, I'm going to have everybody's links to your social media so people can find you if they want to. And thanks for coming, guys. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so
pleasure.
much,
Thank you
James.
for having us.
See you guys.